And the rebuilding of the walls around Jerusalem has begun under Nehemiah, and there is trouble afoot. Uh, Sanballat, or whoever, whatever his name is, was greatly enraged, angered, it says, and greatly enraged, and he mocked the Jews. And he was, making fun of them, and so were his men, that, man, they're going to build this wall, and if a fox gets on it, it's going to fall down, They had no confidence in the building abilities of these Jews, and they were mocking them, making fun of them, and Nehemiah prays to God. He says, "Hear, O God, for we are despised. Turn their taunt back on them, and give over as plunder in the land of captivity. Do not cover their guilt. Don't forgive them. Don't look away, but turn their taunts back on them. Do not let their sin be blotted out, for they have hurled insults in the face of the builders." So, kind of an indirect plea for protection, for guidance, but to have their mockery turned back on them. And so the Israelites continue to build a wall, but now there is a threat of attack coming in as well. That if you're not going to quit because we're mocking you and making fun of you, we're going to come in and attack, and we're going to we're not going to allow this to happen. And so and the Israelites are getting tired. And verse 10, the strength of the burden bearers is failing. There's too much rubbish. We're unable to work. And so it comes down to the fact then that half of the people are armed and ready for battle, while the other half work. But the other half that are working still have their swords on. Some of them have swords in their one hand and are carrying rocks and whatever they need to rebuild the wall in the other hand, because of the fear that they have of attack from Sanballat and his men that way. Verse 19 says, the work is great and widely spread out. We're separated far from one another on the wall. But rally. If you hear the sound of the trumpet, rally around us. And Nehemiah has some better guards, some better, maybe well-equipped soldiers or something, kind of protecting him, because, he was the king's cupbearer. So he had some place of prestige and honor a little. But the work continued, and the work went on. But chapter 5 continues that. There was a great outcry among the people, and now because of their wives against their Jewish kin. With our sons and our daughters were many, we must get grain, so we must eat. I mean, they were working, they were spending their own, they had no money, they were running out of food. They were running out of nourishment. And not only that, but they had to support themselves, but they were still making pledges, paying taxes to the government. And again, then it comes down to Nehemiah, verse 6. I was very angry when I heard their outcry and these complaints, and after thinking it over, I brought charges against the nobles and the officials. You're not treating these people right. You're not treating these people the way they should be treated. You're taxing your own kin. But then it all works out, because the problems of the economy, the problems of, not having enough, become solved. And, and part of it, way back in, the books of the law, it was illegal for an Israelite to charge interest to another Israelite. You could loan them money, but there was to be no interest. And this was one of Nehemiah's complaints here, was that they were charging interest to their own kin, to the Israelites themselves. But they come in verse 12, we will restore everything and demand nothing more from them. We will do as you say. And he says, I shook the fold of my garment, so that God may shake out from every house anyone who does not perform this promise. It's, asking God to, make sure that this is done and done properly by all of these people. And then in verse 14, moreover, from the time that I was appointed to be their governor in the land of Judah, neither I nor my brothers ate of the food allowance. I mean, he wasn't, so Nehemiah was paying his own way. He wasn't putting the burden of his subsistence and everything on the people that way either. And you think about this, it says, moreover, there were at my table 150 people. This was the number of people that Nehemiah was, responsible for feeding and taking care of every day, for providing for. We sometimes, we think of the government, and, how, they're getting taken care of, but they have those responsibilities too. And it's, you don't just say everybody take care of yourself. I mean, these officials back then had the responsibilities of all of those people. And he said, I did not demand my food allowance because of the heavy burden of labor that way. And so, he was trying to be a good leader and to to be a good example. And then chapter 6, it was reported to Sanballat and Tobiah and to Gresham the Arab and to the rest of the enemies that I had built the wall and there was no gap left, although it says the gates had not been completed at that time yet. But the wall itself was up, so all they had to protect then were the gates, which was much less daunting than trying to protect the whole perimeter of the city that, anybody could come in from anywhere. And we don't think so much of walls of protection now, but, I think about, the Vatican has a protection wall built around it, and I think about gated communities and some people that have, the White House is fairly protected, and we know that there are barriers that are set up, but, to protect the ones that are living there. And, in the way back in these days when Nehemiah and these Israelites were living, the threat of thieves and people coming in to plunder was great. And where better to plunder than the city? So the need for walls around the city was important for the protection, the safety, and the comfort of the people that were there. So, so then these other officials, Sanballat and them, want Nehemiah to come and to talk with them somewhere else. But he understands that it's a plot to get him out in the open so that they can harm him, do away with him. And they tried many different times to get him to come, and he continued to refuse to go and meet them. And he also said that, the hands of these people building the walls will not stop, but they will continue to build. And he was even encouraged to go and hide within the temple from these people so that, he would be safe and secure. But he said, I'm not going to go and hide from them. We're not going to live in that fear. He said, why would a man like me go into the temple to save his life? I will not go in. And, so again, he was being an example for the people. In verse 15 of chapter 6, the wall was finished on the 25th day of the month Elul, and in the 52 days. And when all our enemies heard it, all the nations around us were afraid. And they perceived that this work had been accomplished with the help of God. And so, 52 days doesn't sound like such an awfully long time to rebuild the wall. But it was not, the full height. It was about half of the original height of the wall. But it was a barrier. It was a beginning. It was safety. And not only the Israelites saw the hand of God at work, but their enemies as well saw the hand of God at work within the building of the wall. And this chapter ends, and Tobiah sent letters to intimidate me. And, so there was, the opposition was great. And I think about that today too. There is much opposition to the workings of God. And I, talked about that, on Sunday with the, killing of a priest, the continued persecution and killing and murder. I just will call it what it is, murder of Christians. And, it's just a fact of life that Satan is at work, and he will never stop. but God is greater than all.